Let's I got to get the intro. I almost went to Shoggy without the intro. My goodness, what a ball dropping moment that would have been.
Timberlake rocks.
Is that a mandate of yours?
God, what are we talking about here? Good question. Can some of it be about sports? Yeah. All he needs to do is just get in front of people and state his case. If they had the mandate from the people, blah, 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 I don't know where that information came from, but I would question it.
Time for the Morning Mandate with Ryan Rishaug.
This is what sports broadcasting is all about.
You know what? That may be a good point, Ryan.
You broke the story, Ryan.
Rishaug is one giant 6'2" pile of Charmin.
It is the Monday morning Got Your Back mandates. Visit them at gybpod.com/YEG. Find Got Your Back pod on pretty much every single platform. The boys were on there last night on YouTube, grinding out a late Sunday episode. We thought might have been happening at some point, I guess. Shoggy, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Yeah, man. It's been a bizarre week. By the way, it's Ryan Rishaug, if anybody's wondering, based on the way you've spelt it on the stream this morning. I don't know if that's a Mattawanic joint or what's happening there, but Rishaug.
Yeah, Rishaug. Where was Rishaug? Where was this spelled? YouTube. What am I looking at here?
YouTube stream. Rishuag. Rishauggy. You call me Schwaggy today.
It's not bad, eh? Schwaggy. What's up, Schwaggy? Good to see you, buddy.
What's up, Dusty?
Man, you've covered a lot of press conferences in your time here. A lot of coaching changes. What stood out to you yesterday, Shoggy? Let's just start there.
What stood out to me is that it's the first time I've covered an Oilers press conference where I showed up, looked at the podium, and wasn't sure who to ask the question to.
Yeah, fair enough, right?
I mean, you got Paul Coffey. Like, am I asking questions to the assistant coach? Am I asking questions to Jeff Jackson? Am I asking questions to Ken Holland? Special advisor to the owner. There's a lot of stuff going on that podium, and I think it was definitely disjointed. There was mixed messages. It was the structure feels off to me right now on a couple of fronts. One, what I just discussed, right? All the different people there, Ken Holland, who actually made the decision while there was no
clear answer on that.
Made the decision. Like that's not the way it's supposed to work. Someone's got to make the final call, right? What happens if there's a trade that needs to be made at the deadline and there's disagreement on it, right? Who's making the final call? So there needs to be, and maybe there is, and they just didn't want to say. That's likely the case. But then also just the idea that you've got a special advisor to the owner that's going to be in the coach's room now constantly. And if you're players, you're looking at that and you're like what's happening here? Who's running this? Who's actually in charge here? And I think Paul Coffey's very well-intentioned, and I think he just wants to go in there and help. And I don't disagree that maybe there's a pathway to Paul Coffey doing some good things in there, but I don't think you can be both. I don't think you can be special advisor to the owner and assistant coach at the same time. I think it messes with chain of command. I think it messes with people's heads. I think it doesn't empower the head coach to come in and put his own stamp on things. So, Dusty, it all feels a little messy. And maybe it'll all be fine. Maybe it'll all work out just great.
Yeah.
But it feels messy.
Yeah, dysfunctional was the word I used yesterday. Like it just didn't seem to vibe right. It's funny you bring up, they won't say who made the decision, but I watched a bit of your guys last night, and I thought you made a really good point on it. It sure doesn't seem like a Ken Holland decision, right? Like Ken Holland's not a guy that usually rolls out 13 games in and fires one of his guys who he's got in place as coach.
100%. This does not have Ken Holland's fingerprints on it at all. And I think it clearly signifies the transition, right? Yeah. Like Jeff Jackson, Paul Coffey are calling the shots, and Ken Holland in the final year of his deal is there to do the heavy lifting and make the phone calls and look for solutions to make the team better and all that. But at the end of the day, in the last year of his deal, this is more of a collaborative effort / Jeff Jackson or Paul Coffey or Daryl Cates is kind of the one making the calls. There's no way that Ken Holland's solution to this is fire Jay Woodcroft, hire Chris Knobloch, and put Paul Coffey in as an assistant coach. That's just not. I just can't imagine that Ken Holland comes up with that set of solutions. And so again, I mean, maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll be okay. Maybe Paul Coffey will go in there and he'll have people's attention. And I asked him that question yesterday about the chain of command and how do you do both jobs? And he said, well, it's about respect, right? But if one of the biggest problems with this group, guys, is accountability, and that Jay Woodcroft maybe didn't do a good enough job of holding his players accountable, and getting rid of those mistakes, because you can't sit there every day of the season and talk about your players making big mistakes over and over and over again before it becomes an issue of, what are you doing to get rid of them? What are you doing to discipline them? What are you doing for accountability? And that's what this came around to. If Chris Knobloch needs to have a better level of accountability in that locker room, has he been positioned to do that? Right? Has he been positioned as the guy to go in and be the absolute authority? The buck absolutely stops with him. Everybody knows it. Full backing of management, the owner, everybody. Or is it kind of like, okay, yeah, he's here and he's the coach and he'll be respected, but the advisor to the owner is down on that end of the bench.
That's just it's such an awkward situation for a guy getting this chance for the first time.
You can't do both jobs. I think Coffey probably needed to step away from his advisor role for the rest of the year and say, my focus is in the coaching office. And, maybe one day I'll get back to the role with Daryl Cates, but to do both, I think is awkward. And I think Paul Coffey's well-intentioned. I don't think I think he genuinely was, thought maybe he could help, or they asked if he could help. A little bit weird that he had no interest in the job.
It was funny when he said, no, I didn't. At first I was like, no.
And then suddenly he's doing it.
Yeah.
Like, he never really explained how he came around on the decision. He just said, well, they asked me and I said no. And then I talked to my wife and told her, and she was surprised. It's like, well, where in there did you change your mind? And he's there till the end of the year, right? I tweeted that yesterday. Nothing beyond that. He's there till the end of the season. So I don't know. If things go great and the Oilers take a really good run, they're going to roll Paul Coffey back out as assistant coach again next year.
I think they make him general manager. To be honest with you,
I heard you guys talking about that. Yeah, I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see which way that goes. What did you make of? And obviously, it can't just be a coincidence that their last three significant moves were Connor's former line mate, his agent, and his head coach now.
Yeah.
So what did you make of Ken Holland say, he talked to a bunch of the players last week about this decision, then Jeff Jackson saying none of them were brought into the conversation on it? Could there have been, could that both be true in that spot, or is it just a weird message sending from those two guys?
I think when things are getting ugly, it's normal for managers to talk to leadership.
Yeah.
And say, what's going on? What do you need? What's your sense of things? I think when big decisions are going to be made, it would be normal for the general manager to check in with his core players and take the temperature. Now, could Ken Holland be confusing the idea that did you check in and take the temperature with your group with did you ask if McDavid or Draisaitl wanted the coach to be fired? Maybe there's a little bit of confusion in there. But what I do know is the optics of Ken Holland saying, yeah, we checked in with everybody. And Jeff, you know Connor really well because of your relationship. So I'm sure you can speak to that. And Jeff's like, we didn't ask him.
Yeah.
We didn't. No, we didn't. There was not. No. It was a terrible optic, right?
Yeah,
it was goofy. It was a terrible optic. But, could there be a little bit lost in, should Ken Holland have been talking to his leadership group over the last 10 days? 100% he should have been. As the general manager, that's your job. But the question from Tom was a little bit more specific to when you make a move like this, do you? And Ken was like, I'm not going to tell you what they said.
Yeah.
But it's my job to take the information and make the decision. So he left a lot wide open there for speculation that you're saying you did. And then Jeff Jackson's like, no, he didn't.
Yeah.
It was weird.
That was weird, especially when he said, I use what they said into my decision, which is
the other moment I didn't like. The other moment I didn't like, and I'm not sure if you guys I might even have this clip here. Let me see if I might even, because I got the technology to take over your show completely. So when Tom asked Chris Knobloch about the staff,
we talked about this.
Have you guys played this clip?
No, we didn't play that clip, but we talked about it. You can play it if you have it.
So Tom asked Chris Knobloch about the staff and said, is everybody going to be returning, in their same role?
He didn't know.
Well, listen, this all happened fast. He was literally coaching a game like the day before. So maybe it's just strictly because of how fast everything had to happen. But if you're Chris Knobloch and you're taking this job, all of that should have been determined before this press conference. And it's all like, okay, this is what it looks like. Hey, Chris, here's your staff. He didn't get to bring his own guy in. So here's Paul Coffey. Here's Glenn Gulletson. Here's Mark Stewart. Dustin Schwartz. Here's your staff. And, this is the plan. And it's like they hadn't even gotten that far because when Tom asked the question, Chris looked at Ken and you'll hear it. The first voice you hear is Ken's.
Of the assistant coaches, I know, Chris, you're coming in here. You just had a chat with them. Everybody's role kind of staying the same in terms of the guys that are still sticking around on the coaching staff.
Yes.
Yes, everything's staying the same. Obviously, there's going to be some different responsibilities.
I mean, you get it there, right?
Yeah,
he looked at Ken. Ken went, yes. He said yes. So it's just, there were a number of different levels in which it kind of looked a little.
That was like, you would have thought, you're right. You would have thought they would have said, and these guys are all staying and they're going to continue in their roles. And obviously he wasn't sure about that because he looked over at Ken.
Accountability.
In that spot.
Accountability.
Well, I mean, you asked about the accountability thing yesterday, Shaggy. How did they? In fact, Ken Holland basically admitted Jay Woodcroft couldn't hold these guys very accountable because of the cap decisions that he had made.
Yeah, I call BS on that. I'm sorry. Sure, it's not ideal.
From a healthy scratch
perspective,
hold
players accountable.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, from a healthy scratch perspective, you can't call BS on that. At least, like
you can't scratch them for sure. But what you can do is roll over them for 3 or 4 shifts. You can sit a guy on the end of the bench for a few shifts. It'll resonate and cause a ripple effect through that entire bench. Holy crap! He just skipped over Hyman for 3 shifts after that penalty, or he just. Like that resonates. And Jay Woodcroft had tools at his disposal to hold his players accountable. Ken Holland said that I did talk to Woody about benching guys. And, in the end, he didn't do it. And I kind of understand why, but, blah, 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 blah. Jay Woodcroft needed to do a better job figuring out how to get the mistakes out of his players' games. He needed to work with them and figure out ways. You can't just stand there every day and say, it's not the system, it's mistakes these players are making over and over again. Well, that's your job too. Can we talk about Ken Holland specifically here?
Of course,
by the way.
Of course.
Like the bullets are flying on this Ken Holland thing, right? And people have this vision that we need to go into this press conference and just like absolutely hammer Ken Holland with a litany of questions specifically about every move he's made, right? And that's just not the way it works. This is the situation when you go into a press conference like that. You got a list of priorities and things that need to be asked about. They put 4 guys on that podium. So the only chance to talk to Knobloch was during that press conference. The only chance to get answers on what's going on with Coffey is in that press conference. The only chance to get answers from Jeff Jackson on what is in that press conference. And I had 2 sets of 2 questions, right? And so, sitting there and grinding Ken Holland, his decisions are what they are. And we all know what they are. We all know the goaltending hasn't worked out. We're all going to get on air the next day and talk about the mistakes he's made and talk about the accountability for Ken Holland. We all know the answers to these questions because the results are what they are. So I know fans are mad, and they feel like it needs to be like this barrage, but that's not the way it works. The one question that we could have asked Ken Holland that didn't get asked yesterday is, what's your responsibility in all of this? Right? That would have been a fair question.
How much do you take on is that?
100%.
Yeah, no, that's
and as a media group,
yeah.
We're all taking turns and everybody's got their angles. So that one got skipped, and I'll admit to that. But this is a situation with Ken Holland, guys. He's in the last year of his deal. Jeff Jackson is at the helm making these decisions. Firing Ken Holland does nothing to make the team better tonight. And Jeff Jackson is not in position, I don't believe, to want to take over and be the GM. And the next GM is not in place yet. So by firing Ken Holland now, all you're doing is creating more instability, putting an inexperienced guy in charge that doesn't have the help of the experienced Ken Holland, thinning out your organization through the most important months. Ken Holland's not going to be here next year. We all know that, right? We all know that. So, the idea that he needed to be fired out the door right now, I get people are frustrated with the moves, and he's responsible for the goaltending, and he's responsible for them being so tight against the cap. Firing him right now doesn't make the team better tonight. So people want blood, right? They just want blood. Accountability. But it's not Ken Holland right here, right now. That's not the answer right here, right now, because he's not pulling the final trigger anymore anyway.
Yeah, that's
and if they got rid of him, it'd be Jeff Jackson doing the job. So how does that make sense?
Well, but isn't Jeff Jackson the final trigger man anyway? I feel like Ken Holland yesterday was talking about a decision that he didn't make, which puts him in a real awkward spot.
100%. Dusty, How do you think Ken Holland did at the deadline last year?
Well, anytime you can bring in a guy like Matthias Ekholm, you're doing pretty good.
I think he made the best trade in the NHL last year. I think Ken Holland has consistently made big moves to improve this team.
Bukestad was that was a great pickup too.
He has made some excellent moves. Now, has he made, to use his words, boo-boos? Yeah, he's made some big ones, and those are hurting the team right now, and yes, he's responsible for them. But I'm here to tell you, the Oilers would not be as well equipped heading into a trade deadline this year with Ken Holland gone and Jeff Jackson standing there doing it himself with Paul Coffey's help, who's the assistant coach, and the rest of the Oilers management
So you
staff.
think Ken will still be a valuable asset to them come trade deadline time, basically?
Of course he will. Look at the deadline he had last year.
Yeah.
That doesn't just disappear. So yes, he's made mistakes, and yes, there's accountability there. But Oiler fan, you want Ken Holland in the driver's seat if the option is either him in the driver's seat and Jeff Jackson making the final decisions versus Jeff Jackson doing it all for the first time, or them rushing a decision on who the next guy is. Because whoever the next guy is a really important hire for this organization, and rushing that decision is no good either. He's in the last year of his deal. They're going to work together on the decisions. That's just the structure right now, and it's better than him just being gone. Because the one thing he can do is improve his team at the trade deadline.
You know, it's funny we bring up Ken Holland here, and then Jeff Jackson, and I would agree with you that Ken Holland, this doesn't seem like a Ken Holland decision to move out a coach at this stage of the season already. In the press conference, he laid out that they got to a conference final, lost to a Stanley Cup champion. Basically played in a series last year against Vegas that everybody kind of thought whoever came out of that was going to win the Stanley Cup. Last year, they had 109 points in the regular season, the highest total they had since 85-86. Connor McDavid had the best year of his career last year as well. And then 13 games later, Jay Woodcroft is fired. So is this Jeff Jackson seeing a window to get his guy in place? Or where did Woodcroft blow this in 13 games, I guess?
Yeah, so I don't believe Jeff Jackson came in and was like, first chance I get, I'm bringing Chris Knobloch in here. I think the Oilers felt like they had their coach in Jay Woodcroft and really were hoping for success with him. I don't think there was any plan for this to have been, or even the idea that first opportunity we're going to do this. I truly don't believe that at all. Where did Woodcroft go wrong? Taking a step backwards is not an option for this organization this year. It is not an option. You got Draisaitl's negotiation coming up. If this year is a 6-month death march to missing the playoffs and it's misery, what does that do for Leon Draisaitl's desire to come back here? And then if Leon Draisaitl doesn't come back, what does that mean for Connor McDavid? There is a tremendous amount on the line, goes well beyond this season. So taking a step backwards, not an option. So what did he do wrong? He implemented a new system with the express intention of reducing goals against and being a better defensive team, and none of it worked. It didn't work. And the optics are he broke it, right? It wasn't that bad defensively last year. From the trade deadline in with largely this roster, they gave up the 4th fewest goals against per game. So he brought in this system, implemented it with intentions of making it better, and it got way, way worse. And then on top of that, the everyday narrative of it's just mistakes, it's just mistakes, it's just mistakes. That's your responsibility too. How are you showing yourself to be dynamic, finding new solutions? I remember the last time an Oiler head coach took a team that looked like it was a playoff group, got into a really bad slump and didn't have answers was Ralph Kruger. Remember that? How bad that streak was? Basically killed their playoff chances. That was the end of Ralph. He wasn't dynamic enough and didn't show enough solutions. And I don't think Jay Woodcroft showed enough that he was finding solutions. And so was it fair? Of course not. Is it every bit as much on the players? Yeah. But taking a step back was not an option. And the fastest way to elicit the biggest change is to do what they did here. It's not fair. And by the way, feel awful for Dave Manson, right? He's been through a tremendous amount the last 4 or 5 months and had to be a really, really hard day. So certainly thinking of him and his family, and have been for a long time here. This is ugly, and there's an ugly side to it. But to answer your question, bud, that's what he did.
You don't think, like did Holland go to him and say, hey, you should probably go back to the old system? He said no. It just seems weird to me that, I said it over the weekend. We knew their goaltending was always just going to be average. That's what it is. We knew they were going to have defensive mistakes because they did last year. The biggest difference here is actually that they're not scoring 4 goals per game. They're scoring 2.6. And they're still getting chances. They're just not burying chances yet. And I feel like they're going to
start. 4 a game is not.
No,
that's not
they gave up 4 a game over stretches last year too, and then got it dialed back in for a little bit. When Jack Campbell won most of his games last year, he was still allowing 3 or 4 goals a game. They were just scoring 5 or 6. So they're going to score. Like that offense, they're getting all the chances. They're just not burying them. I feel like whether it's Woodcroft or Knobloch, the scoring, it's like McDavid's not going to be less than a point per game guy the rest of the season. It's just, I feel like in the end, they're just not scoring. Like if this team's going to have success, they're still just going to have to score their way out of their issues. That's just the way it's always been, unless you think, go ahead, Eric.
Well, Coffey's words yesterday, Ryan, pretty complimentary about the defense up to this point, right? Systems and players and everything else. Like, it's not like he's coming in and saying, I got a big job to do and this is going to take a lot of work. He
said he likes their blue line.
Quite a bit of praise, which is kind of goes against most fans and what we've been talking
what's
about.
he supposed to say
in
that situation? I just feel like they're going to start scoring again and everything will be back to where it was.
Well, I heard your take earlier that if the Oilers are going to turn around and make the playoffs, they probably would have just done that under Woodcroft anyway.
I think they would have. Right? I'd stand by that. Yeah.
And that's it's a fair take, right? They won that last game. They played better. But the poignant clip from Ken Holland when he was asked if the players were still playing for the coach, right? Or had he lost?
Yeah, about the core. Yeah.
He basically said, like, had he lost them? I don't think so, but I couldn't wait around another 10 or 15 games to find out. So somewhere in his head, he didn't think that the players lost the coach or vice versa, but he wasn't 100% positive and he couldn't wait any longer to find out. One of the concerning things here, it's not like this team is killing itself and just not getting results. Man, are they ever. Can't ever question the battle level. Can't ever question that's not the way it's been. We've been talking post games about too many lost puck battles. How are you talking about that with the season in jeopardy the way it is, right? So this team had not been putting its best foot forward and just not getting the bounces. That's BS. That's a cop-out. This team isn't working hard enough. They're not working consistently enough. The leaders aren't laying down enough of a positive example for the way things need to be, right? Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and though McDavid is hurt, you need to be absolutely setting the tone for attitude, setting the tone for work ethic, setting the tone for body language, setting the tone for all of these things. They're that important in there. And the rest of the group will either follow or the pretenders will be exposed and left behind. But they haven't been. Leon Draisaitl has not been. Yeah. Right? The frustration has been there.
Body language hasn't been good.
Those guys need to dial themselves in on every other aspect of their game other than offense, and then the offense will come, and they haven't been.
Shaggy, before I let you go, I have to get your thoughts on what does this do for a spotlight on McDavid, considering it is, where they want to say it is his former junior coach and it is his agent now running the organization. How much more pressure does that put on Connor McDavid to make it work here?
I mean, McDavid's under tons of pressure, right? As much as any player. And I don't think for a second McDavid's behind the scenes saying, I want this, I want that, right? I just don't believe that about Connor
But it
McDavid.
also can't just be a coincidence, though, right?
No, but you know what it speaks to, Dusty? It speaks to an organization that's worried that he's going to leave.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair. So they're trying to do everything they can.
Their decision-making process is, let's do things with that in mind. Now, Jeff Jackson is a qualified hockey man to do what he's doing. He's been around a long time, and he's legit. Chris Knobloch eventually would have gotten an opportunity to coach in the National Hockey League. Would he be on a ton of shortlists this summer? I'm not sure. Debatable.
Yeah.
Connor Brown is a good player and arguably what the Oilers needed. So it's not like they're going out and making dumb decisions because, Connor's demanding it. That's not happening. These decisions all make some hockey sense, but the pattern is undeniable.
Yeah.
And it speaks to an organization that's making these decisions with Connor McDavid's comfort level and wanting to put familiar people around him
in mind
because they're worried he's going to leave. And I'm not sure that's the healthiest place to be making those decisions from. And I'm not sure that that's what Connor wants, quite frankly.
What do you ask him today, Shaggy? I mean, you're going to be right there in the thick of it. How do you approach this with Connor today?
Yeah, no, I think you just get his reaction to Jay Woodcroft and Dave Manson being let go. I think you ask him about what level of accountability the players have in all of this. I think you ask him about where his game is at and the steps he's taking to try and get himself through this, if this is the most frustrated that he's ever been. I mean, that's the stuff. It's now leadership, right? Now it's their turn to answer for what's happened here. They play a massive part in this, and that's the risk here. Is that the players get let off the hook when you make a coaching change?
Exactly.
You don't give it someone else's fault. It's not. This isn't fair to Jay Woodcroft. It's as much about the players as it is about Jay Woodcroft, but we all know sports. So I think to the leaders, it's about, what level of responsibility do you feel? How do you make sure change happens? And where are you at with your own game? I think that's basically where it's at. Anything you want me to ask?
No, you guys usually have it handled pretty good. Looking forward to seeing that.
Apparently not. Apparently not.
Were you guys taking a ton of heat yesterday for I mean, it always happens that way.
People are really mad at Ken Holland, right? They wanted us to go in there and just, blast away. But I mean, we probably the question should have been asked, what level of responsibility do you take for where things are at? But he did mention a couple of things. And so we had other priorities, man. I have 4 questions. I asked the accountability question to Ken Holland about if he wanted more on the team this year. And I asked that question to Chris Knobloch. I asked a question to Paul Coffey about chain of command. And I asked the question to Jeff Jackson about, are you concerned neither of these guys have done this before?
Yeah. And
they're supposed to be your solution? So if you think me going after Ken Holland is more important than any of those questions, respectfully, I disagree with you.
Got your back post-game tonight or what?
Oh, yeah. Struds and we'll have Struds tonight. Struds and Brownie were really good last night, too. We had a lot of fun. So we did about 85 minutes. So if you get a chance today, download.
That's a good one. All right, Shaggy, have fun today, man. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, great to talk to you guys. Cheers.
That's Ryan Rishaug, TSN, Got Your Back podcast, him and Rob Brown and Jason Strudwick. It's going to be interesting tonight if they don't win. I think they win. I mean, we're